Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mahmoud Aziz, and I am the director for the for Middle Eastern Studies. We would like to welcome all of you here to our conference, which is Middle East Science Fiction in Translation Conference, that's sponsored by the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Texas at Austin, and also organized in collaboration with us in the CMES. This event is happening today in person and tomorrow on Sunday over Zoom. Please check the CMES website for more information about the conference panels. Before we go ahead and talk about today, I would like to thank the UT Austin Center for Middle Eastern Studies for this collaboration. Thank you, Dr. Karen Gromberg, Dana Afrosiabi, Beth Bowman, and Sophie Kaplan for making this event happen. Also, I would like to thank our CMES team, wonderful people, for making this event happen also. I would like to thank Julie Ellison, Abby Lemmer, Janessa Recklifs, and Thomas Kenny. As some of you know, this event builds on a science fiction translation contest that UT Austin ran. That contest was open to those who translate from Arabic, Persian, Turkish, Hebrew, and other languages of the MENA region that feature works of fiction, poetry, and creative nonfiction as well. It was put together by Ya Allah, which is a biannual journal of Middle East Studies and Literature in Translation. The journal is produced by the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. Before I introduce our speaker this afternoon, Ms. Zoha Kazemi, Dana Afrosiabi from UT Austin will briefly announce the winners of the contest and talk about the criteria that were used in evaluating the submitted works for the competition. After that, we will show two videos, one for one of the winners and one for a runner-up. Dana?
Hi, everybody. Thank you to everyone who helped put together this conference. I'm really glad to be here. And I'm excited to announce the winners of the science fiction contest. Just to give you a little bit of background, the purpose of this contest was to highlight science fiction from the Middle East and North African region, and to bring excellent examples of the genre from the region to Anglophone readers through our online journal. Ya Allah. The call for the science fiction translation contest went out in the spring semester of 2024 and was open to all prose translators working from the languages we publish: Arabic, Turkish, Persian, and Hebrew, as well as other languages of the region, and translating authors from the Middle East and North Africa. We defined science fiction widely, so that we included dystopian stories as well as stories with more traditional science fiction elements, and we accepted short stories as well as excerpts from longer works. We ultimately received a total of 20 submissions from all over the world, 15 in Arabic and 5 in Persian. From these, I narrowed it down to 5 finalists in Arabic and 3 finalists in Persian, and then the judges working in those languages narrowed down the list to a total of 4, 2 in each language. And from the 4, all 4 of our judges chose the final 2, which means that the winners were chosen based both on the strength of the translation as well as the narrative strength of the work. The first prize receives $1,000, the runner-up receives $500, and both works will be published in the next issue of Ya Allah, which comes out later in the fall semester. So the first prize goes to Michelle Quay for her translation of Sadegh Hidayat's story SGLL. And the runner-up is Catherine Van de Veet for translating an excerpt from the novel Cairo Maquette by Tara Imam. Apologies. All right, sorry. The honorable mentions are Dazi Mada by Sherwin Vakili, translated by Alia Mehin Goldbaum, and The Author and His Translators by Musa Old Ebnu, translated by Dalia Youssef and Melanie Magado. I want to thank everybody who participated. It was a delight to read all these stories. And I also want to thank our judges, Levi Thompson, Blake Atwood, Merv Tabor, and Adriana Jacobs for their work. I look forward to publishing some of these stories in the next issue of Ya Allah. And thank you again for being here.
Now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our speaker this afternoon, Ms. Zoha Kazemi, who is a PhD student at the English Language and Literature program at the University of Washington in Seattle. She's a very well-known author in science fiction, an experienced novelist with 16 published books. She's also a writer of speculative fiction that includes science fiction, fantasy novels, short stories, flash fiction, and screenplays. Ms. Kazemi holds a Master's of Arts in English Language and Literature from Islamic Azad University Central in Tehran in Iran. And her MA thesis sparked her great interest in fiction early on. Her thesis was on the subjective reader response criticism of Arthur Clarke science fiction short stories. After that, she has been a leading figure in publishing creative work in Farsi. As a prolific author since her master's degree, she published 15 works over the past 11 years. Most of these were published in Iran and in the United States, and some of them were translated into English. Her novels include Death Industry, The Juliet Syndrome, The Covering Dust, Year of the Tree, and The World of Lollipop People, that came in 3 volumes. Her other published work includes The Silk Road Embrace, Birds of the Rubosity, Isolation, The Hatching, and The Blue Dusk. These works were published in magazines such as the Baladi magazine and also in anthologies such as the Anthology of Persian Women Writers. Ms. Kazemi also has been active in publishing screenplays in Farsi, and these include My Ideas Wake Me, The Cold Season, and The Grandpa's Magical Stones. Because of her known reputation as a creative writer, Ms. Kazemi has been leading a good number of positions in a number of professional associations. Some of these include being a member of the board and secretary for the Tehran Writers Guild from 2018 to 2021. Also, she has been the founder and the head of the referee committee for Rama Story Writing Contest from 2021 till the present time. She has been also the head of the referee committee for the Asfahana Award, that's a speculative short story contest that was done in Iran in 2021. She also was a referee for the same award in 2019 and the founder and the manager of the Rama Bookstore. Ms. Kazemi was honored with 10 literary awards. Some of these include the Utopia Award nomination in the United States for 2023 for her work, The Hatching, at the Baladi magazine. Also, the Nofi Award for the Best Speculative Fiction Novel of the Year for the Death Industry, published in Iran in 2021. Also, Flying Turtle Award for the World of Lollipop People from Iran, 2018. And the VAV Award acknowledgement for the beginning of the cold season from 2011. Ms. Kazemi's talk today is titled Symbolism in Iranian Science Fiction and Issues of Bilingual Authorship. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Zoha Kazemi.
Hello and good afternoon. I'm so honored to be invited to this conference about science fiction in translation. Thank you, Dr. Aziz, and thank you, Julie, for everything. I will be talking about Iranian science fiction. Most of the things I will be saying here is from my own first-hand experience. It is not a matter of representation in a way that, representation comes with a huge responsibility. I'm going to be talking about the works that I'm familiar with and I know about, and I have searched about a little. So first of all, I want to say that translation is very important. It can be one of the most effective ways of starting a cultural conversation. And events like this can do a lot in terms of bringing people together and bringing cultures together. For Iranian literature, especially the most recent works, this conversation has not been fully shaped. For decades, we have been importing literary works, especially literary fiction, from various countries and from different kinds of languages. But this has been like a one-directional talk. It has never been a full-round conversation. There are many reasons and interrelated underlying causes for this, such as language barriers, geopolitical situation of Iran, social media and advertisement and branding, and each of these requires like a whole set of research and a whole conference for itself to think about what these barriers are and how we can address them. But regardless of this, Iranian literature owes so much to translation. We have been translating fiction from countries and languages from all around the world, from English, German, Spanish, French, and also from Asian countries like Japan and Korea and China. And science fiction has been the same. We've been importing science fiction for a long time. After the Islamic Republic, most of the most famous works of science fiction, for example, works of Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, Philip K. Dick, all of the famous golden age science fiction writers, their works have been translated and were available in Iran's market for more than 30 years now. So the readers in Iran are fully familiar with this genre. As for Iranian science fiction, well, we have talked about Sadegh Hedayat, and one of his short stories has already won an award today. Well, since Sadegh Hedayat's attempt at writing science fiction with his brilliant short story, SGLL, there have been attempts at this genre, but these attempts have not been continuous. They've been like scattered attempts, and it hasn't been a developed way of writing or something that was done continuously and with awareness. But there has been some really great changes in the reading community in Iran. Our readers are actually used to reading translation fiction, and before social media, they learned about different cultures and different countries through reading books, watching movies, and they just like to learn about how people live in different countries. They like to learn about different cultures and lifestyles. So one of the things that science fiction or fiction in general has been doing for Iranian reading community has been providing them with knowledge about ways of life in different cultures and different countries. When we first started writing science fiction in Iran, we started having a different set of problems. This problem appeared as we tried to, as writers, we tried to localize or domesticate science fiction in Iran using Iranian names, locations, themes that are relevant to the country and to our culture. At first, there was a great resistance from the readers. I remember, people saying that when they read, for example, my novel Pine Dead at the time, it was published about 4 years before COVID. And at first, it was one of the first books in science fiction that was published around that time. And after that, many writers started writing in this genre. So it was, in a way, one of the pioneers of the new movement of science fiction in Iran. So the first reaction I got from people was that it was weird to read Iranian names in the book. We were so used to reading science fiction in translation, so reading a Persian name in a science fiction book seemed to be very awkward. But eventually, as they saw how their own concerns and conflicts could be reflected in a work of science fiction, they were actually amazed and they loved the book. And well, this book, in a way, reflects the revolution in Iran and the war that comes after it. So the representation of the modern history was actually something that people liked about the book and they were connected to it. But it was after COVID broke down that they were really into the book, and they tried to see how science fiction was actually working for them. Well, but after some time, we can confidently say, like after like 10, 15 years that that writers are writing in speculative fiction in Iran, we can say that readers prefer Persian science fiction or Iranian science fiction to translation works. They can see characters that are more similar to them. They can see their own concerns, their own problems and crises in the book, and they can see familiar names and settings, which nowadays they seem to like. As an evidence for that, I could say one of my books, Juliet Syndrome, is one of the bestsellers in Baj publication, and this publication publishes the very new and very famous authors of science fiction from all around the world. So having this first-hand experience, I can say that, well, the readers, the reading community, the fans actually prefer science fiction books that are written in Iran. So how this journey happened, I just want to explain a little bit more and why we started writing in science fiction. Iran has a very rich and proud literature that dates back to more than 10 centuries. And Iranian modern fiction movement started around about 1940s with realistic and, in some ways, naturalistic stories. These stories focus more on recording and criticizing the current situation. Most Iranian contemporary writers believe that while our reality is filled with social crisis, there is no need for future imagination. Why should we write about fictional possibilities of the future when we are unable to pass through today's complication? This is part of the mentality and the common mode of writing in Iran's fiction. Well, at least it was until a decade ago. But as you see, the world is also changing. We have the new millennial and Gen Z writers and readers. They no longer relate to the reactionary realistic fiction and have access to internet and social media, and they are in direct contact with the world, with international cultures and languages, and they want something new and imaginative. So having them as our readers, it makes the emerge of speculative fiction inevitable. This genre can address current and future problems in a more creative way, and it seems that the emerging community of readers in Iran seems to has responded really well to this. Well, eventually, around 15 years ago, fan fiction forums were created in Iran. For example, Fantasy Academy, I don't know if you've heard of it. It was a very big thing at the time. They started by writing fan fictions, and they started writing their own stories. In parallel, writers started writing actively in speculative fiction, and independent publishers in Iran who were already profiting from translating and publishing science fiction books without copyright, of course. They started backing up Iranian writers of this genre that had a new, enthusiastic, and promising market. So if you want to have a look at some of these books that have been published in recent years, let me see if this works. So these are some of the notable science fiction books that have been published in like 10 years. You can see Roanas by Mr. Idrom, Resonance, again by the same author. These are written in a sort of space opera with a Gajarian sort of language. We have a book, Arizona, by Amir Meisami. He's a really big fan of this state, and I believe he would be happy if he could be here one day. It's a dystopian novel. It's been very, very well received by the readers. No One's Trace by Alireza Barzandeh-Nejad is also a dystopian novel. The Demolished Cities by Jahangir Shahrahi is also a dystopian climate change novel. These books have been very well read in the last few years, and they've been nominated for many awards. Mavara has won the first Nufa award, and Arizona or Adepagichkas, that they were all like candidates in Iranian awards. These are some of the notable science fiction books for young adults. We're not going to be talking about them today in this panel, but I just wanted you to know a few of them. We have like series like the Final Quartet novel series by Armina Salemi, Rivers of Mars, which is the first book in a space opera military sci-fi by Mehdi Bonvari. We also have the Silent Uprising novel series by Ali Saghai, and one of my favorite young adult books is Time Continuous by Taha Rassouli. I believe he's also working in games industry, so his book is actually very exciting and engaging. Well, they are young adult books, but as an adult, you would enjoy reading them as well. So I've read all of these books, and they were all very engaging and very exciting. So as I said, we had websites, contests, and awards that were emerging in these last few years. For example, there's the NUFA award, which you can see at the bottom there. This award, I have won this award 2 times and was acknowledged once. There's a new award, Parentheses Award, you can see at the bottom over there. It's an ongoing award, and these awards work on academy basis. So the academy consists of readers, writers, fans, literary critics, and all of this come together. They're like about 80 or 100 members that vote for best books. We also have like Afsana Story Contest, which I was a referee and head referee for some time. We have Rama Bookstore, which does hold story contests every year. And the aim is to find new voices and new talents. So there were, as we started writing in science fiction genre, we had some problems and some hurdles that we had to overcome. One of them was we had to go against the flow of the developed literary fiction, the social realistic fiction that has overtaken our literature at the moment. And it has been hard. I mean, it was not an easy journey to do because then they seem to be very traditional in the way they think, that traditional in language making and genre making. So they not only they did not support the new emerging speculative fiction in Iran, they tried to do whatever they could to stop it from growing and from achieving its goals. We didn't have any academic and critical support. We still don't have that. There's a big distance between academia and fiction writing in Iran, not just for speculative fiction, but for all modern fiction that is being produced. I hope that conferences like this can change the atmosphere for the better. There was also misconceptions about the audience's age. Many people believe that when you say science fiction, fantasy, they immediately think about Star Wars and they think it's only good for young adult readers. But many of the works written in science fiction are actually not good for young adult readers. They may have like very dark atmosphere in the book. The mood is usually very dark, very pessimistic in some ways, and it could also have violence and some other things that are not good for young adult audience. And also there was a misconception about the literary worth. It's usually dismissed as escapist literature. It doesn't have any value in terms of language, in terms of all the literary criterias that are in place right now. Well, it's all under debate, but I can say that this is not the case, and many of the books that are written, especially in speculative fiction in Iran, do have really great literary value. The only thing we need is someone actually reading them and finding these, decoding them, talking about their language, talking about what they have tried to do. I know some of the writers have spent a lot of time. They have designed their works very carefully, especially the language. And also we had no awards and established support, which we have changed that for in some ways. And well, we didn't have any link or possibility for adaptation into movies and other media, which hasn't changed. And we still don't have this link or any in any foreseen future, we cannot see any adaptation from any of the speculative fiction books that are being written. But there were things in favor for us, the millennial and Gen Z enthusiasts, fans, readers, and writers, as I talked about, the independent publishers that profited from translating science fiction. We had social media in favor of speculative fiction in Iran and emergence of new generation of writers, as I said, emergence of new specialized awards and contests. So I want to talk a little about what I said, domestication of science fiction in Iran. By importing science fiction as writers, we have brought in the new tradition of creatively reimagining our present and imagining our future. Western science fiction stories often speculate about the future and mind-blowing technological advances. In a developing country like Iran, future is not perceived the same way as it is in Western countries. And this is due to the many current geopolitical problems, and it's a very long story that if I want to get into, it will take some time. Iranian writers have tried to reflect their own themes in their sci-fi stories using subgenres that can benefit them the most. Therefore, as seen in the first slide, most of the sci-fi written in Iranian literature are dystopian fiction. This subgenre is so favorable among Iranian readers that even translations like George Orwell's 1984 has been at the top of the best-selling books for the last few years. And you can see why it has been so favorable given the situation of people and the way they are hoping about the future. Also, The Hunger Games, The Handmaid's Tale, and other dystopian fiction are very popular in Iran. Dystopian fiction allows us as writers to create a reimagined society where we can freely explore the themes that tackles the problems we are facing in our lives and confront our worst fears. As you know, Iran has severe censorship, but a reimagined society in a sci-fi story with new technologies puts the authors on the safe side. As writers, we use this to our advantage, and we try to reflect our social, political, and religious concerns and criticism in a story that takes place in a defamiliarized world. By focusing on the subgenre, we have found exciting and also very scary ways of producing dystopias. New elements that can lead to a dystopian society. Some of the imagined technologies and scientific developments presented in Iranian science fictions are unique and original in their own sense, and they come from first-hand experience of living in today's turbulent Middle East. Some of my stories take place. Some of my own stories take place in Tehran. Some of them take place in other cities of Iran. For example, I have a story taking place in Shahmirzad, another story taking place in Neyshabur. Different cities, different landscapes, the natural settings of the country are reflected, which are different from other countries in the world. We try to use these settings as our stories. We're trying to model the characters on Iranian figures and lifestyles. So in this way, when someone reads a science fiction story, the character becomes Iranian. It becomes, the way they act, the way they talk, the way Iranian people do things, their mannerism and everything. And also cultural references. For example, ceremonies like Nowruz, like Yalda, the costumes, food, music, art. I have personally really tried at this, trying to bring as much as I could from Iranian culture into my books. I have Kuku Sabzi in one of my science fiction books. I have Khorish Badamjoon in another. I have the Saz Tar in one of my stories. So these are the small things that makes a great difference in domesticating science fiction. Developing the language, this has been the hardest part so far. We have had many debates on how we should engage in terms of language. Should it be simple and standard? Should it be literary and dense? Should it be poetic? Should it have like Mr. Idrom does, a Qajarian sort of tone to it? What kind of language is suitable for Persian science fiction, for Persian horror, for Persian detective stories? And you can see where this problem comes in. We don't have any ancestors that have written in this way, so we can look up to them and say, well, okay, so this person writes it this way, so I will try and imitate and try to do whatever others have done. And this is still an ongoing debate, and we haven't settled down on anything to say, well, this is the standard, or we haven't even settled down on establishing whether we should have a standard for this or not, or should we just try and see how it evolves. Using historical and geopolitical events and themes, as I said, for example, the Islamic Revolution, the wars in Iran, historical eras, they are mostly reflected in works of fantasy, but you can see traces of them in science fiction as well. And reflecting the problems of now, modern day problems and crises. For example, the censorship itself is one of the problems. I have tried to bring that in one of my books, Humanoid, Adam Nama. I have tried to talk about this in any way I could. There are so many other problems. If you read my story, Birds of Robo City, you can probably see how it is based on modern day problems and crises. And also building upon past mythology and Iran's modern symbolism, which we will be talking about. So. For this panel, I will be briefly introducing the use of mythology and present motifs in Iranian speculative fiction. This reading, however, requires academic research and analysis, which has not been done. And what I'm saying is I'm just merely suggesting that you can find these influences in this kind of work or this symbolism in this book, but to actually analyze this and to see how these are acting within the text, it requires, further reading. As for any new emerging literary movement, Iranian speculative fiction is also influenced by past cultural material and existing literary traits. As you know, Persian Empire was already filled with and enriched with unique mythology from Elamite era, Zoroastrian era, and so on. But after the emergence of Islam and its spread through the Middle East, South Asia, many new mythical creatures like jinn and ifrit, rooted in Arab Islamic folklore, found their way into the Iranian literature. You can see traces of all of this within Iranian speculative fiction. The main influences were Zoroastrian mythology. I will share some examples of this with you. Shahnameh-based fantasies, it has become a genre of its own because many writers are writing fantasy based on Shahnameh. Islamic or pre-Islamic Arab mythology, Western culture and literature, and modern Iran symbolism reflection. I'm going to give you examples to see how each of these are working. Also, before we get into that, I want to say that most common science fiction subgenres are historical epic fantasy, Shahnameh-based fantasy, as I said, urban fantasy, dark fantasy, and horror. Science fiction, mostly dystopian and post-apocalyptic. I don't know why the slide is jumbled up, but yeah, because I'm going to be talking about these two right now. Well, first of all, Iranian fantasy and horror writers are nevertheless influenced by all this rich literary heritage and mythology. Some writers are using Zoroastrian and Mani mythology as basis of their references, for example, using mythical creatures portrayed in Bondahesh, for example, Deves and Amisha Spentas or Amshas Spandan. Some use Ferdowsi's Shahnameh as their main source of inspiration, and some focus more on Islamic influences. For now, Iranian writers are perhaps less influenced by modern speculative fiction of the Middle East due to the unfortunate political reasons that has led to weak cultural communication with neighboring countries and the void in the translation of their books to Persian. But since the best Western speculative fiction books are translated and published in Iran, Iranian writers are in many ways influenced by Western myth and fairy tales. Vampires and witches, for example, are just two examples of Western mythical creatures that reappear in our present fantasy and horror stories, written mostly for the young adult audience. But the Western influence is even greater when it comes to science fiction stories. Unlike fantasy and horror, they can lean on ancient Iranian mythology and heritage. Science fiction as a modern mode of writing is only around 120 years old, if in the Western culture, and it's even much, much younger in Iran. So it has no roots in Persian literature. And since this genre looks upon future and advanced science and technology to create new worlds, as writers of this genre, we have no other way than to turn our heads towards developed countries for inspiration. Although we are finding ways to localize them, as I said, and make them Persian, but nevertheless, we're using developed countries for a role model. And okay, let's have a look at the books. These are some of the historical epic fantasy books that I wanted to talk about. First of all, you can see the notable works by Arman Aryan. He's one of the most famous fantasy writers in Iran. He mostly writes for young adult readers, and he bases his books on different historical eras of Iran. He bases his books on Shahnameh and Zoroastrian mythology and all that. He has more than 25 books, I think. The other book I wanted to talk about is Band Divan or Band of These by Behzad Qadimi. This book won the Parenthèse Award last year, very deservedly won the award. And it's based on Zoroastrian mythology with many references to Deves such as Eshma as the Zoroastrian demon of wrath, and Bushas, the demon that brings sleep and ignorance, and also Malkus, the destroyer, and Astavidad, the demon of endless winter. He actually fictionalizes these Deves and for dramatic purposes and slightly changes their names. For example, Malkus becomes Markush in his book, and he, in a way, makes them modern to fit into his work. And this book is very amazing. I wish that you could all read it. It's a very powerful fantasy story, historical story taking place in the Sassanid era. The other book, well, it's very obvious, 5 Deves and 1 Amishas Penta. It's definitely about Zoroastrian mythology and how and a depiction of that in modern fantasy. These are some of the Shahnameh-based science fiction and fantasy books that I told you about. Works by Nima Kohandani, Broken Border series. It was really well received in Iran. The book Jand by Mohammad Reza Faizi Fard. It's a science fiction Shahnameh fantasy for young adults. And we have another book here, The 8 Destinies of Bahram. 8 سرنوشت بهرام by Shervin Vakili. I think one of his stories was translated for this contest, and you're aware of his writing. So many of the characters are actually the same characters that are named in Shahnameh, and the events are also inspired by Shahnameh in these books. These are urban fantasy, dark fantasy, and horror books. You can see how the cover of the books have turned darker and scarier. I think one of the best subgenres that are working right now in Iran is this subgenre. I'm not really good at writing in this subgenre myself. But I find these books to be very amazing. One of them is Dahbar Mahil by Elena Rahbari. She uses a lot of Zoroastrian mythology again in her work. These dark fantasy and horror books are mainly based on Iranian cities and towns and the modern culture, and they are mixed with mythologies in a way that makes them mysterious and frightening. In Dahbar Mahil, Elena Rahbari actually refers to the birth of Zoroaster, and she has like vivid symbolism. For example, there's a veil that two sorry for that. And that two trees are being planted by the veil. Tehran Tarin by Behzad Qadimi means the dark Tehran takes place in the streets and back alleys and on the grounds of today's Tehran, and it's very scary. And it uses modern symbolism, for example, the Milad Tower as basis, as the main place of the demon that's playing in the book. And then you can see references to pre-Islamic folklore. For example, the character of Manat in the story. It's a very beautiful book, and I really suggest you read it. There's also the Cursed Silver Axe by Behzad Qadimi. There's also lot of Zoroastrian mythology and pre-Islamic Arabian mythology in this book. Saratan Jan, or The Jinn Cancer by Ramod Khanlari, is one of the famous books of speculative fiction in Iran. And as you can see from the name, it has lots of jinns and ghosts in it. Mahi Tuti va Shayatin Mian Rudan, The Fish, the Parrot, and the Demons of Mesopotamia is a book by Muhammad Sarabi. It also has a lot of pre-Islamic demons in this book and Mesopotamian mythology, if you're interested to know more about them. And these are the science fiction books that I showed you at first. I just want to say that some of the symbolism you see in these books, mostly Shahrai Munhadem Shode, the demolished cities, the symbolism comes from today's Iran. It's a post-apocalyptic novel about what happens when Iran dries up and we have no more water. And then he weaves this post-apocalyptic dystopian imageries with folklore and past cultures, and it's a very beautiful book to read. No One's Trace by Alireza Barzaneh-Nejad talks about one of the modern problems of Iran, which is immigration. As you know, many people are trying to go to other countries, and it's a very hot topic in Iran, and it's a dystopian city. It's in a way a reflection of Tehran's today's Tehran, but in a dystopian way, where there are gangs at play and there's violence, and there are lots of people who are leaving the city, leaving the country. Arizona is the setting of the story as a dystopian setting is a prison, a large prison. People are held inside in prison, and they're living their lives the whole time. You can see from these last two books how dystopian as a prison is being, in a way, or as a place where people have to stay or have to choose to leave and go, has become a sort of modern symbolism of today's Iran. These are some of my books that are not translated into English yet. Well, Time Rider is. I wanted to talk a little about my own books. So The Juliet Syndrome, as I said, is one of my famous books. It's one of my bestsellers. It has not been translated into any languages yet, and it's actually the setting is future Tehran, where people cannot fall in love anymore, and there are like big corporates that are selling love packages to people, and the story is in shape of it's a detective story, the story of a girl who has committed suicide, and a detective is trying to figure out what has happened to this girl, and you can read the whole thing through this investigation. Adam Nama or Humanoid is my other dystopian story. I'm sorry, it's a lot of dystopias. And this story is actually, it doesn't have like names or cultures. It was my second book my second attempt at trying to write Iranian science fiction, and because of my experience with Pine Dead or Kajzadegi, where people were very awkward towards Iranian names, I tried to make it in a way non-Iranian and make it a sort of global book. So the names you can see, well, I have reasons for each of the name pickings and stuff, but the story is not really that Iranian, but the theme is about censorship, and about the main protagonist is a writer whose work is being censored all the time, and her brain is being wiped out for the second time because she has been asking too many questions. So this book, my other book, Renaissance and Migrant Death Industry, won the Newfer Award. It's dystopian, and you can see, and you can read a lot of recent events that has happened in Iran reflected in this book. For example, the events of Abana 98 and other things. You can see the uprisings of Iran, the things that happen, where we cannot write about them in literary fiction. You can see how they can be reflected in death industry. In this book, people know their death dates as well as their birth dates when they are born, and this puts people into different classes according to their age, and creates a sort of dystopia. Baranzad Rainborn is my book that I translated to English myself. I will talk about translations if we have time. It's a post-apocalyptic book. It's happening like 500s from now. The whole world is drowned, and there are no more cities and land, and people are living on ships and on islands. And when you read the book, you can see how today's Iran, especially religious and geopolitical problems, are portrayed in the book in a defamiliarized world after everything is drowned. So also, as I said, Pine Dead is a book about a global pandemic that kills a lot of people, and in a way I'm reflecting Iran's revolution and also the war that came afterwards, and the problem of the rise and fall of population in Iran. As you know, we have this problem that we call Daheshasti, or as you say, like the millennial generation. There's a lot of us in Iran, and we have had a rough time because of we didn't have enough resources and everything. So in a way, I try to tackle this problem in Pine Dead and try to show how it is for us, how it's been for. If you read the book, it's been dedicated to millennial generation of Iran. Yeah, The Covering Dust is a fantasy. It takes place in the Elamite era, before Zoroastrianism, before we had like one god in our religion. So we had many different gods at the time, the Elamite era, and it's a story about immortality, about religion, about religious governments and stuff like that. So The Covering Dust is my only fantasy book for now, but I have another fantasy book coming up. It's for young adult for young adult audience, and well, it's actually a thriller taking place in Tehran, but also with the theme of fantasy. And that one, The Mehrzan Gate, is going to have a lot of Bondahesh creatures in it from many different things. I have for each of these books, for example, for Covering Dust, I had to do a lot of research to know about all the different aspects of the time, and especially Zoroastrian mythology is not at all taught in schools. People don't have access to them unless they want to study it themselves. So it's quite hard to conduct research on these matters for writing these stories. I'm saying that because, as you see, many of the other writers are also trying this, and this means that they are doing a lot of work by themselves without any support, without any help. And I have the 3 books for young adults. The Lollipop People is a dystopian for children. It's been very well received. It's selling quite well in Iran. Children love it. And it's been, it's been my success point so far. My latest book is Purging of Murder Chipsets. It happens in a dystopian society. It also resembles Tehran. You can see the bazaar in this like cyberpunk story. The bazaar, in a way, is Tehran's bazaar. You can see the food again. You can see how the characters are become Persian in a science fiction book. And this story is about a country that is about a city that doesn't have any crime or violence. And so the police has been dismantled, and now a serial killer has started killing people in the streets, and they have to put together a task force to tackle this problem. And again, I'm talking about, yeah, that you can see many symbolisms from today's Iran reflected in this book. And yeah, they keep saying we don't have any crimes, and there are robots that are sent to clear out many places. And again, I'm talking about censorship in a very deep level, on a very deep level in this book. So if you're interested, these are some of my books. And these are the 3 books that are translated into English. Year of the Tree is not actually science fiction. It's in a way like magic realism, but I believe it's mainly folklore. It's the stories I've heard from my grandparents. And Time Rider was recently published with the good translation of Amir Sepahram, and you can order available on Amazon if you want. So now I just want to read a little conclusion part. So as a conclusion, I want to say that Western sci-fi has been the leading voice for so long, representing Western culture and somehow oblivious to the rest of the world. But the truth is that the future belongs to all. A depiction of the future with the exclusion of a vast majority of the human race seems unfair and unfulfilling. Also, by limiting ourselves to Western sci-fi, we will deprive the world of the many new flavors and original ideas that are being produced outside of the Western culture. This could, translating and bringing these kind of stories into Western culture could help science fiction from being looped into repetitive concepts and imagination and push the boundaries. So in a way, I'm hoping for globalization of sci-fi in the sense that would bring together the whole human race, helping us feel sympathy towards each other and encouraging us to work together to overcome global problems. Nowadays, there's been a global call for inclusion. As we're calling upon including all minorities, it would be great if we could give voice to people from underrepresented countries like Iran and other countries in the Middle East. I guess not many people outside of these countries know much about the independent sci-fi writers that are working in these countries. The global news channels focus only on the never-ending struggles in the Middle East, leaving no room for cultural productions of the region. But as sci-fi writers, like me, as an Iranian sci-fi writer, I want to help in the global progress of science fiction and the prosperity it may bring to the world. Maybe by giving a chance to these works of fiction in the global market, they could contribute to the genre and offer new perspectives. this calls for an all-around collaboration and, as I said, conversation between academia, writers, and most of all, translators and publishers from different countries. If we can actually do this conversation, being able to sit together and try to think about ways of translating in and out of each country, it would definitely benefit us all. I just want to say thank you for giving me a chance today to speak about Iranian science fiction, and I hope that in the future all these stories could be read and voices could be heard. Thank you.